Hi, everybody.
Hi,
Hi, Sohini. How are you
I'm
today?
I'm good and I'm hoping everybody is well as well. And welcome to Entando Connect
Yeah, today we have a new exciting sessions. You
with
know that
another
no
expert.
Entele Connect is, a regular meeting we want to do with host, in which we host people to talk about composability, trends, developers, IT, developing things, companies needs, and so on. So today we are hosting James Governor from Red Monk. So let me say hello to James. Hi,
Hi
James.
James.
Hi, how you doing?
We're doing good. How are
We
you?
good, good, very good.
Yep, great, doing very well. I'm much happier today. It's not quite as hot in London after that searing heat wave we've just had. So feeling a little bit more
Lovely.
relaxed, a little bit
Yeah,
cooler.
yeah, it's the same with friends. Same
Yeah,
thing.
Cool. So how about you just introduce yourself to us and our lovely audience and then we can go ahead.
great. So I'm James Governor. I'm one of the co-founders of a research company called Red Monk. We're an industry research firm and really research and advisory. What we focus on is practitioner and developer-led adoption of technology. So there are other companies that are trying to understand their sort of purchasing-led activities. We really try and focus on the culture of software developers, the decisions they make, why they make them, and really how an organization can better serve developers so the developers can better serve the organization in building applications and services.
Mm, that's interesting.
Wow.
So we can say you are
Very interesting.
developer centric.
Yeah, I'd say so. We consider ourselves. I mean, we're an industry analyst company, but we also see ourselves as sort of developer advocates. You know, we
Mm,
think that
Mm,
the developers, practitioners are really the most important constituency in terms of engineering decision making today, and
mhm.
that's why we focus on them so attentively.
Yeah, this is the kind of topics we are talking about so many times here. Recently, with macro architectures, hexagonal architectures for more developers, practices, and so on. But we are also, all people know that we are also talking about composability, so the
mm,
capability to build application using multiple components, build them and reuse and share the
reuse.
different elements.
Yeah.
So, by the way, James, I can say at the Red Monk, what is your view or your analysis about these composable trends actually currently? Excuse me.
Yeah, I think we've seen, frankly, in all areas of the stack, in all areas of software development, composability is increasingly important. It's been the way that we build things. There are numerous different trends you could look at. Whether it's the sort of the JavaScript revolution where people are just going to npm, they're pulling down packages, they're putting things together accordingly. Whether going to GitHub to find code, even whether going to Stack Overflow, they're searching for things. We live in a world where we're sort of going and picking components and putting them together to create solutions. And that's true whether we're talking about the world of as say, sort of JavaScript, but also increasingly in the back end.
Mm.
So overall, in terms of productivity, in a networked world, it just makes a lot of sense. And this goes right back, sort of the history of this industry. If we think about the ability to compose components in a networked way, I mean, that goes back all the way to sort of small talk. But today, obviously, we've got new implementations of some of these ideas. And we just see a lot of that. I mean, partly from a productivity perspective. So yeah, I think that whether you're talking about the world of Java, JavaScript, but also newer languages and runtimes, we see that as increasingly important. I mean, obviously, the world of serverless is all about composition, and even in the world of people, sort of business users pulling together services. If you think about, okay, I'm using Monday, I'm using Notion, um, uh, you know, uh, this sort of project management on steroids. That's a composition world as well. So we're seeing a
Mm.
lot of that across the industry.
Yeah,
mm,
so that means probably this is something that we did a lot before, but I'm just wondering maybe nowadays we have the technical capabilities to make it better. I'm just wondering about that. Is a trend that comes because people want to do that, or because they wanted to do that, but no, we have the right capability. So
I
you
think a lot of things come together in this. I mean, obviously, I haven't even got onto the whole sort of monoliths being broken down into
yeah.
microservices discussion yet. But I think that there's a number of different underpinnings. I say just the fact that we've got the internet, so that we can. I mean, what would we be composing with? So the fact that the internet is there means that we've got this much more capability to collaborate, much more capability to discover, and so on. I'm always a bit cautious about things being better, because frankly, some of the most incredible software engineering in history was done in the past. On the other hand, the sorts of networked architectures that we're currently building do seem amenable to composition. In the world of microservices, I think what we've seen this concern is, if we've got monoliths that are not so composable, it prevents us from being able to evolve the application. And obviously these days, we live in a world of thinking about, could we do multiple production deploys per day? And a lot of that came out of companies that we much admire, the sort of the Netflixes of the world. We hold them up as a model for software delivery. We don't all need to do hundreds of deploys a day like they do. If we're a bank or something, we're not going to constantly be touching our back-end systems. But I think that the direction of travel, in order that we can have agility, and we've got these underpinnings, as I say, the internet, the powerful networks that we've got, the abundance of technology. It used to be that everything was more constrained, so let's get the monolith working and really optimize that. Whereas now we're like, oh, we can pull down a new VM. We can use these resources that we've got. So abundance is one of the underpinnings as well. So I think that microservices composition is some technology, some fashion, some process. And of course, it's a people thing, and it does seem to be that's the way that a lot of people want to work at the moment. But business agility, I guess, is a key driver.
Yeah, that's true. That yeah. My well, this is my own
Opinion.
thought, opinion.
Yeah.
But I thinking, it's like the planet alignment. So would you say that in English? Planet
Yeah.
alignment. So every time you have something, I will not say it's necessarily new, but it's just that, that things that works well, but if you combine it with something else, it's even better, and with something else, it's even better, and so on and so on. It's like every time you have a kind of new thing that appears,
Composition.
it even we can do it now, or let's say we can start doing it now, because I think it's just something that is starting a new movement, let's say. But because you said we made 10, 15 years ago a move to a more agile world, so adopting more agile processes, and the same with microservices, or maybe we can also say about micro frontends. We did the same, but and finally, probably also runtime, different things. Anyway, and finally, we are here about that. So probably we can say that is that the modernization. So I understand you say, but it's not about make things better. That's right, but probably it's make the things more modern. So leveraging all the elements as much as we can. And in terms of modernization, what do you see, or you analyze the companies are doing that, or they are doing that exactly to modernize their IT, their solutions?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the big questions, because if we are going to move forward, if we're going to be able to refactor our applications, if we're going to be able to compose them, break down those monoliths, we do need a set of practices for doing that. I think in terms of this cloud movement, initially there was quite a lot of lift and shift, just get the application into the cloud without really refactoring it. Some of that might be running older versions of Java or whatever it is. But over time, you want to think about, hang on a minute, we do want to modernize the application itself. And so one of the questions is, how are we going to do that? Because if you're going to start doing microservices, there's one thought in your head might be, oh, good, we're going to break apart the whole application. But it probably makes sense to do that gradually. One of the reasons I think that people have been so excited about service mesh in the Kubernetes world is thinking about, hang on a minute, we could take that monolith and begin to break it down into microservices mediated using a service mesh to kind of hold all of this together. Now, is every enterprise out there using service mesh to rethink their Java applications? No. But on the other hand, some of this is not new. If we think about event models, service-driven models, in a previous wave, we were talking about service-oriented architecture. So some of this thinking and some of the engineering has been done. Perhaps we're modernizing some of the interfaces and so on. I think in terms of patterns, we are moving beyond lift and shift now. And we're seeing organizations say, hang on, we do need to modernize. And there you're in a question of what tools and techniques do I use? It's not necessarily my job to sell other people's ideas, but I think Martin Fowler's Strangler Fig pattern is an interesting one. The idea of taking a core sort of monolith and building around it, and you build around it, and you build around it, take more services, until eventually you're left with an entirely new application. The reason that's attractive to me is I talk about progressive delivery. One of the ways that we've seen people think about software delivery is really taking advantage of things like A/B testing, blue-green deployments, canarying, that abundance I mentioned, where you've got, hang on a minute, in the past, if we wanted to run two versions of things, that just increased the expense dramatically in terms of infrastructure requirements. Now it's absolutely no problem. I could have 5 different versions of things and choose one. So the idea of progressive delivery is, let's allow a certain percentage of the user base to try the new experience, perhaps with a feature flag. And if it breaks, obviously you don't roll that out more broadly, or perhaps even from an experimentation point of view, if you decide that's not the functionality you want, you also don't roll it out. But the idea is that you could roll it out to 1% of your user base, and then if it's working fine, you're happy, you're comfortable, you roll it out to the remaining 100%. So I think the Strangler Fig pattern actually fits pretty well to what I call progressive delivery, where progressive delivery was really in the notion of new applications, but that can just as easily be used in terms of refactoring apps, where you're thinking, okay, let's take part of that service, or let's take part of that application, make sure that it has well-documented interfaces, and then go from there. Use that service, roll it out partly with a new application, and if that works, you can continue to move more across. This stuff is not easy, though. It's hard enough.
It sounds more like a PBC. I'm sorry to interrupt you here, but it sounds more like a PBC. Yeah.
It's well, I mean, to be honest, I don't even know the acronym. What's a PPC? Am I being a boomer
Oh,
here?
I'm so sorry. It's packaged business capability.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I think that's that makes sense. I mean, I think that's what organizations want. The standard unit of work should
Yes.
be useful to the business. I think that's the core of what we're thinking about with microservices. So
Yeah.
none of this stuff is easy, though. It's hard enough, like going back and looking at the applications we wrote 6 months ago or 2 years ago, or it's hard enough to understand our own apps. Trying to understand others is hard. And I think that's one of the big challenges here. So that's why there's a fair amount of caution from organizations. But on the other hand, they know they need to modernize.
Yeah.
Well,
What
I
wanted
think
to? Oh,
go
yeah.
on.
Sorry.
No,
No.
no, go on.
Yeah. Yeah. No. I just wanted to say that that's funny, James. You are saying because I'm listening to you, and I'm trying to looking back to the previous things I did several years ago, and I figured that, oh, I remember a company I work with that tried to modernize one solution they had. And I remember also in this company, some people, other teams did something differently. We tried it, well, from what I saw, when we tried to modernize one things in a one shot, like let's rewrite everything. For example, let's moving all these things. Let's rewrite everything into microservices. So we need maybe to create 3, 4, 5 microservices. And also we need to create gateway, application gateway. Maybe we also need to recreate the all the UI parts. So maybe we need to rewrite all the front end things. So that means that we need to create not one application, maybe 5, 6, probably 7. So it's very hard because you can success rewriting or creating or coding one micro front end, maybe 2, maybe 3, but you can be sure that all the 6 or 7 elements you want to create will be exactly what you want to or exactly what you need to have. So in the meantime, I saw people that did canary testing, blue-green deployment, feature flags. They use feature flags a lot. So they're building it step by step. They're starting like creating pipeline. They create a lot of pipelines differently. Let's say, and then they make it more and more complete and complex, of course. So instead of trying to imagine what the final result will be, they're starting to think about how we can concentrate ourselves, concentrate the modernization into one small business part, and focus on that. And then around that, we can then modernize the other things, and probably if there is a chance you failed at the first attempt. So maybe in this case you just need to give up. You can give up and say this is not for us. So you try, but you reduce the risks. And if you try to do everything in one shot, one time, one moment, that means probably you increasing the risks. So all the things that you said makes a lot of sense for me, because this is exactly what I saw. And honestly, I was not aware about that when I did that. And nowadays, I'm just wondering, but oh damn, why we tried modernizing everything in one time? It was, painful, high difficulty, with a lot of difficulties. Even for all involve a lot of business people that are very different each others, and try to make everything converge in one result. That's probably not make a lot of
Messy.
sense.
Very
Yeah.
messy.
Yeah.
Well,
So
I think one
excuse
of the
me.
challenges there is that we're not very good at assessing technical debt. So I think historically speaking, the idea was the entire application was debt. There was no value to it. So we'll start again. We'll build again the monolithic thinking. We need to build one whole new app and roll that out. But I think it makes more sense to realize that there is some value in what you've got. You've got to understand that service. And certainly, look, I mean, if you're a bank or a telco or a retailer, or a big bang is really dangerous because you're running transactions. So you want to be quite careful about the approaches you take to modernization. And I mean, I think big bang approaches that I feel like that was part of that sort of waterfall world, that hopefully now we're moving towards something which, as you say, we appreciate the app is going to evolve. You don't know what we're going to need in tomorrow, let alone 6 months, or all applications are going to have to evolve to meet user needs. There are going to be new interaction paths. If we just think about the transition from web through mobile, there are going to be other access mechanisms. We think about, now we're moving. I mean, the idea that, where is it? I'm can so easily do my banking with this device, and I've got two-factor authentication. I mean, I'm more secure doing a banking transaction like with this than
anything else.
Walking into the bank itself. I mean, we're living in a world where there are so many different modalities that the apps are going to change, and regulations keep changing. Competition keeps changing. Obviously, you're a bank, and then one day you wake up and Apple has a card, and you're like, wait, I compete with Apple now, which is not a lot of fun, I have to say. I think with Apple is not a great.
That's scary.
Not a great place to be. Competing with Amazon, another one. Not necessarily where you want to be, but you don't have a choice. Retailers. So that's one of the reasons I think that we've seen so much modernization in retail recently, is because of the competition from Amazon. That's where you say, hang on a minute, our applications need to be more flexible, so that we can, as I say, meet user needs. Great example during the pandemic, when you had to do things like curbside pickup, or changing the payment mechanisms, or how were we able to do that? Some of that flexibility was because retailers had already responded to the outside threat from web-based commerce.
Correct. Wow, so many awesome things about modernization. But I have a question that revolves around Kubernetes.
Yep.
So like it's with regard to the impact of Kubernetes on developers and development process. So many of our customers are adopting Kubernetes and are happy with its ability to automate the IT process, but there are some concerns about how it impacts development. Like, what are some concerns that you have seen from your customers who have moved to Kubernetes? And
Well,
what could be some possible solutions? Yeah.
The developer experience sucks. I mean, Kubernetes was not built for developers. I mean, Kubernetes is a platform for building platforms. And if you're saying to developers, oh, in order to deploy an application, you need to be worrying about, YAML, you need to be understanding the Helm charts, the sort of the overheads in Kubernetes. There are a lot of internals of the platform that developers should not be thinking about. And we've sort of been in a period of being like, oh, everyone, oh, of course you've got to know the internals of it. But, with Linux, did we need to understand everything under the covers in order to use Linux? No. And I think that the industry as a whole is currently trying to get its hands around how can we make Kubernetes a technology that is developer friendly, so that you can have a platform team that is really thinking about the platform engineering. They're the people that need to know about Kubernetes. The developer, on the other hand, that's not the experience they want. Developers generally, they just want to be writing and pushing code. So I think that the distributions that we're currently seeing, whether you're using cloud-based kind of EKS, AKS, and so on, whether we're talking about Tanzu, OpenShift, Anthos from Google, these distributions increasingly need to think about what's the developer experience. That's why Google, okay, you've got this Kubernetes platform, but actually something like Cloud Run, which takes away a lot of developer decisions, actually gives you more freedom. By having less to think about, you can just focus on the app. And if we look at the really hot sort of new platforms, Versal, Netlify, and so on, they've taken a developer workflow, they've made it extremely easy, so the developer isn't thinking about isn't thinking about how am I going to build the pipeline or any of this. It's provided for me. So I think that one notable area there is there's a platform called Backstage that Spotify built that they've now open sourced, and it's basically a developer portal. So you go there in the morning, you can see what you're working on. If you want to kick off a pipeline, or you need some container instances or anything else, you do it through that platform. It has a service model behind it, and we're now seeing that being adopted by third parties. Like, for example, I mentioned the VMware folks with Tanzu, which is their application platform. They've adopted this Spotify technology so that when a developer goes there, it simplifies things for them. So I think as a whole, we've exposed too many sharp edges to developers, and having gone through an industry trend of extreme productivity, we called it convention over configuration, and it started with sort of Ruby on Rails and so on. We seem to have forgotten all of that, and Kubernetes has been all about configuration. And even like the security defaults have been too open. You're giving everyone root access. This creates security. So I think that the big industry challenge now is actually making Kubernetes useful for humans, for normal software developers that just want to go and build applications. So on the one hand,
easily,
And then I guess that's where people like Entando come in and thinking
Yeah.
about competition for the front end so that we can help you build applications that you can deploy to these Kubernetes platforms.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This is, I think this
definitely.
is exactly the purpose of an application composition platform
This
built on
platform.
Kubernetes.
Yep.
That means, as a developer, you probably don't want to take care so much about Kubernetes. You
Mm.
can leverage it very well because of deploying containers, isolated applications, using different technologies, frameworks, even for the back end or for the front end. But that's true. It should not be a new difficulty in your process to develop or code your applications. So this is why using an application composition platform is very interesting in this way, because that means, oh, let's say it's a kind of layers over Kubernetes that will make all your job easier, and
Mhm.
Also,
we
the
will
developer
take care.
experience better.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's more
absolutely.
about
hassle-free.
that.
Developer experience is critical.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And that was not the design. The design philosophy of Kubernetes was definitely not
Hmm.
developer experience. So, as an industry, we're appreciating the importance of developer experience, partly from developer productivity, but just developer satisfaction. Even with the economy being a little bit more shaky, obviously we still want talented developers working for us, and I think that's one reason. Yeah, developer experience, and this is like Red Monk. This is exactly the kinds of
Hmm.
things we talk about. So it's nice to see that we've been proved right. Very important, and that's the big challenge for the cloud native uh, sort of computing ecosystem is how do we have a better developer experience for Kubernetes? That's the big opportunity.
Hmm. Yeah, because you can either install your own Kubernetes locally and trying to develop everything for your own, but it's probably not the best solution. For example, so you can share clusters, but it's not always the best solution too. I try to develop application using Kubernetes, and I must admit that without having people that is very specialized
Mhm.
in managing Kubernetes, you will struggling a lot, and this is not a good option for developers.
Mm.
So I guess if you don't have the developer adoptions using a tool, you will probably face in the future in too many issue, because when people don't want to use something because they considered it's not as something that could help, but something that is uh, you know make it them slower, is
Hmm.
not a good way to work. So it's not something we
Mm.
want to do. And yeah, so this is why it's very interesting. Well, in the same topic, because we're talking a lot about Kubernetes, but
Mhm.
I can also talk about everything that is about serverless, or let's say native uh, compilation, native runtime. So just for the audience, I want to make it very clear. So we have two things here. The first thing is we saw recently a lot of frameworks. I will talk about more about the Java because I'm more from this world,
Mhm.
but we saw framework like Quarkus, Spring Native, or Micronaut that allow you to. We're using, for example, GradVelm that allows you to compile application into native mode. So that means if you compile it on Linux, for example, it will be able to only to run on Linux. But in the meantime, you can leverage a few features like AOT or something like that that
Mhm.
will make your application starting very very fast. And in a world where you can decide to pop applications as is, to scale ones or just to starting a new ones, it's probably a game changer. That, oh, you don't need to wait 5 seconds to have your application started. Maybe it's now 0.002 milliseconds to have it, even the memory consumption. So I would like to know what do you think about these trends actually about the adoptions of how can I say that native frameworks
Mhm.
that will help also to have more serverless adoption.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Serverless obviously does require some technical underpinnings that enables you, and certainly thinking about the implications of cold starts. That was something that Amazon has thought through. So when they came along with Lambdas, the idea was that yeah, a lot of those sorts of issues that we might have seen with Java apps were things we didn't need to worry about, because we were talking about ephemerality. We were talking about, hang on a second, we only want to pay when people were using it. Response time was everything. Now there are a whole set of challenges. I think I think some of the interesting thing is that serverless itself, not even in this Java world, we'll talk about in a minute, there's a lot of complexity there. So I think that's the experience needs to be improved there as well. But when we look at the world of frameworks for Java and so on, obviously we've just made that transition to the whole industry. We see Spring Boot everywhere.
Right.
Spring has very much become the lingua franca for modern enterprise Java development. That said, obviously there are some that are saying, hey, it's not everybody that is really thinking, oh, now we need serverless Java. So we need those much faster boot times and so on. All that said, so for me, I'm not seeing the massive shift to things like Quarkus yet that we saw with that transition to Spring Boot. That's not to say it won't happen. I think there's some interesting experimentation that's happening, and I think that the Java ecosystem is doing a very good job of modernizing to be ready for this world. But I'm not yet seeing a broad-based, as I say, when I'm talking about, let's go and talk to a bank or a telco, they're not quite there yet. So I think at the moment it's interesting and important technology, but I'm not seeing I'm not seeing broad-based adoption yet.
Yeah, maybe because one thing we could try to understand also is what will be the benefits of serverless. So I'm just wondering, it's when we talk about Quarkus or Spring Native or even Micronaut, is we are talking about solutions, let's say technical solutions for doing something. So to make applications that very fast, to reduce the consumption of memory and so on. But one more thing is, do let's say in what are the way companies are using serverless, and what could be the key benefits they want to have by using serverless?
Well, I mean, I think ideally serverless is, it's a managed service, so that's one of the key advantage. The idea is it's something that is we have to do less maintenance because the automation is provided by the platform. So a managed service that scales to zero, and I think it's the scaling to zero. I mean, we're talking about the experience once you've got the infrastructure up and running, but really the advantage should be that we're only paying for it, we're only consuming the resource when we're actively using it. And I think that's an economic argument as much as anything else. So I think that it's the scaling to zero is foundational in terms of definitions of serverless, and it's just a a very different way of thinking. Sometimes it's amenable to actually batch processes. So we're not using it, we're not worried about it, and then suddenly, massive need to, I don't know, this is just off the top of my head, something like check processing, which the bank isn't doing it all the time, but then at some point in the night, they do a load of it. So let's not have an infrastructure that's dedicated to that all day if the only time we need to do this job is between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. Now, I'm not saying that's the only use case for serverless. It might be when I want to, people don't want to, or rather, we don't know. Supposing we're, smug mug, we don't know when people are going to want to. How about DALL-E, right? The AI model. So we don't have any idea what the demand might be for people getting excited about creating AI generated art, right? You've used DALL-E, right? You're both, I'm assuming, you have done that description of something and to see what comes out of it. So from Hugging Face perspective, or there's now a company called Crayon, CRAIY.ON, or anyway, it's Crayon with an AI in the middle. For them, serverless makes a lot of sense. You don't know what the demand is going to be, when the demand is going to be.
Yeah.
You don't want a whole infrastructure that's there running all the time. It might just be at particular times there's clusters of people. Oh, wow, have you seen this new DALL-E thing that we could do or DALL-E 2? So I think those sorts of bursty or batch oriented workloads can make a lot of sense if we're talking about transactional serverless.
Yeah. Let me make a quick comparison. It's like my machine coffee. So when I want to drink a coffee, I don't need to have it on all day.
Perfect.
Because I will probably take a coffee 3 times per day. By the way, you should not drink more than 4 or 5 per day. So let's say it's good.
Disclaimer.
Yeah. Let's say, so that means it can be, let's say turn off, but even be able to start quickly. So I just need to click on one button. It can start on, the machine can start. I can take a coffee and then I can turn it off because I will not need it for maybe 1 or 2 hours. Maybe we can consider that serverless is probably the same thing. It's more about on-demand technologies. So
I think that's exactly right. So and on demand means that we can turn it off. We don't have to be sitting there managing the coffee machine the whole time.
True.
So yeah, I think it's an economic sort of argument as well as a technical one. Well, I think I'll probably be borrowing that coffee analogy myself and using it at some point in the future.
Cool. Well, thanks, Anthony, for the good example.
And I think that's right, because as a managed service, if you want a really good espresso, it's highly unlikely you're going to make it at home.
Yeah.
You want to go to the coffee shop where you've got a highly trained barista that manages the service for you. They understand the humidity, they've got all the temperatures right, they've dialed it in, they pour that perfect ristretto shot. Even if you have a $5,000 machine at home or a €5,000 machine at home, it's still hard to get those results. And so managed services, highly valuable, and we don't always have access to the infrastructure ourselves.
Yeah, probably because behind that, and we always forget that maybe is we need a kind of expertise in a lot of ways. So it's like I'm not an expert at that, so I can let the expert doing that for me and ask them for any service I need when I want. So it's probably a better approach than trying to do everything by myself. And finally, not being comfortable or polyvalent enough to make that. It will make sense. So most of the time, this is what I'm saying. I'm not an expert on that, so I will let the expert doing that, and I will try to focus on what I'm good on and trying to leverage as much as possible of that.
Absolutely, that makes sense.
Perfect.
Cool. I think we're in the end of the hour, and
yeah. Let's say 40 minutes. It was very interesting.
Awesome.
I didn't set a time.
I didn't realize.
Yeah,
Me
I
too.
think we can continue like that, but probably we need to stop before people will take 3, 4, more than 5 coffees. So
there you
I will say that. I would say that. That's perfect. So do you have some words to conclude this session, James? Do you want to conclude with some things we didn't say
Any
before?
message for our viewers?
No, not really. I mean, as I say, I think the key is developer experience. That's what we've all got to focus on. That's what we want from modern technology platforms. That's where Redmonk is going to continue to do a lot of our research. But yeah, we're always interested in stories of better developer experiences, organizations that are succeeding because they're serving the developers. And, hopefully as an industry, we can really lean into that and get more effective.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think we should not forget developers. And
Yeah.
and I can say that
People
as
do.
developer, so like
There you go.
Yeah.
don't
It's
forget us.
important. We
Yeah,
need some leisure.
that's
Cool.
perfect. Good. Thank you,
All right
gents.
then. Thank you
Thanks
so
very much,
much,
both
Thank
of
you,
you.
Sadie.
Anthony. Thank
Have a
you.
good day, everyone, and see you soon for another session. Bye bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.